Hi, all. Welcome to Healthy Living with Dr. EE. And happy Mid Autumn Festival. We wish you and your loved ones good health and happiness. Now, all of us want to be healthy so that we can take good care of our family and pursue our dreams. So, thank you for joining us this morning to learn the correct health knowledge. Now, before we begin the event, please be reminded that the content is copyrighted. No recording or sharing is allowed. Let us all welcome our special guest for today, Dr. Yi Zhang.
Hello, everyone, and happy Mid Autumn Festival. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your morning to listen to my talk, especially on a holiday. I'm super grateful that you all are here.
Dr. Yi, modern medicine has made huge amounts of progress, but when it comes to our health, prevention is always better. Can you tell us more about this?
Right. So, health comes before everything else. Without health, there's no happiness, no wealth, and no life worth living. What's the point of having a long life and all the money in the world if you don't have the health to enjoy it? So, when it comes to our health, prevention is better than a cure. There's two types of people in the world: those who get their car regularly serviced, and those who wait until they hear the engine grinding, and then they just keep on driving until they don't have a choice but to tow it to a mechanic. So far too many people, there's just been this sort of cycle of panic and then regret when it comes to health. It's like waiting to fix a hole in the roof until clouds are overhead and it's already starting to rain. So prevention doesn't receive as much limelight as a cure. People tend to feel like a cure is more important or effective because the results are super clear. Prevention also isn't an exact science. So watching someone never get a disease to begin with, it's just not very exciting. It doesn't make very much of an impact. So people, they tend to wait until they have a problem and then they try to find ways to fix it. But when it comes to our health, we don't want these problems to begin with. Otherwise, it's a perpetual game of cat and mouse. And we've all seen Tom and Jerry, right? The mouse always wins. Many of us have been taught from young that when we're sick, we just have to go to the doctors. They'll fix you and you'll be fine. So prevention, it doesn't receive as much limelight, doesn't receive as much attention as a cure. It's just how people work. Even in TV shows, all the TV shows out there, all the medical TV shows, if they focused it on, you know, Mr. So and so comes in, he ate a healthy diet, he never got sick, never gets heart disease, and then the episode ends. It's boring, right? It's always, someone comes in an ambulance and then the doctors do all their work and then magically the person is well again. That's exciting. So, it's all about the cure and less about the prevention. So what we really want to focus on is focusing more about the prevention. For example, if just let me make another metaphor. If you have a software developer who writes perfect code to begin with, so he's preventing problems to begin with, then as they're sitting there to their boss, it just seems like they're sitting around doing nothing because they did it right the first time. So there's nothing to keep working on, nothing to fix. But if they didn't write it well to begin with, if they're always running into problems, then the problems will keep coming up. But to their boss, they seem like an invaluable employee because they're sitting there and they're always working and they're always fixing problems. Right? But we don't want to fall into that trap. We don't want these problems to begin with. So why is prevention better than a cure? There's a lot of reasons why. So let me go through them. The first one is hospital infections. Let's take a look at these infections. Now, hospital-acquired infections are the ones that you get inside of a hospital, the ones you get from the hospital. Now, these infections are often worse than the ones you get in the community or outside of the hospital. This is because hospitals are actually really, really good breeding grounds for antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So the bugs you pick up in a hospital, they tend to be resistant to antibiotics and they tend to cause more severe infections. They affect about 5 to 10% of all hospitalized patients. According to the CDC, about 1.7 million each year pick up a hospital-acquired infection, and about 99,000 will die because of this infection. So for those unlucky people, you could say that going to a hospital was actually their downfall. And a misdiagnosis does happen. So let's take a look at some of the more common ones. The most common mistake is actually drug error, and it harms at least 1.3 million people each year. According to the FDA, about 7,000 die each year from medication error. So just think about it. Some of these medication names, they sound super similar, or they can be very complicated. Some drugs will also have multiple names referring to the same medication. For example, paracetamol and acetaminophen, they're the same medication. But then you also have to take in the brand names as well, like Panadol or Tylenol. It's all the same medication, but there's so many different names to refer to it. Now, errors, they're a part of human life. It's part of being human. Doctors, nurses, people who work in hospitals, they're only human. For example, when you're busy, stressed, lacking sleep, you're just trying to get through your day and see as many people as possible. A lot of the drugs now are dispensed using computer systems as well. So you can type in the drug, you can select it from a menu. Maybe you clicked on the wrong thing. Maybe you just entered the first few letters of the names and picked the ones that looked about right. Maybe you got the dosage wrong. Maybe you prescribed it weekly instead of daily. Maybe you mishear a drug name. Sometimes instead of writing down the full name, all you get is an abbreviation. So, there's a lot of ways that these mistakes can happen. You can also get duplicates given, like the same drug has the same effect, or you have two different drugs, but they have the same effect and the person's on both. It's all sorts of these little things that fall through the cracks. So 1/3 of all Americans use more than 5 medications. 1 in 5 Americans have experienced medication error. So out of the 5% of hospitalized patients, they will experience this medication error inside the hospital. One study suggests that over 180,000 people will die each year due to these sorts of errors. Right, so another really common error are just scans. Scans can be interpreted incorrectly. So some changes on a scan are super, super subtle, which means that if you're not specifically looking for it, you'll probably miss it. Or you might see something that you think is, not a problem, benign, but it's actually something serious, or you might just miss it entirely. The right test might reveal an underlying illness, just might never have been ordered by the physician, or the results might just have been interpreted incorrectly. So how common is misdiagnosis? Every year, there is an average of about 12 million people in the United States who are misdiagnosed. Autopsy data suggests a major misdiagnosis is made 10 to 20% of the time, which is much, much higher than we ever want to hear. So about 28% of misdiagnoses are life-threatening or life-changing. Over 100,000 people die or are permanently disabled each year. So it can be deceptively easy to misdiagnose someone. For example, if you have someone, a young, healthy man with no other health problems, and they have a headache, most of the time it is perfectly fine and it's just a headache. I don't want to scare anyone. But in a tiny, tiny, tiny minority of cases, it can be something more serious, like bleeding in the brain or something else going on. But because of our preconceptions, because the majority of the time it is just nothing serious. It's these sort of things that are missed because you're not looking for it. And if you're not looking for something like that, it's really easy to miss it. So what happens then is that, people will then think, oh, then why don't you do something like a test? But then blood tests can't uncover everything. Now, there are these institutions that will do these checkups yearly, every year, and it's good to have a checkup done every year, even if you're perfectly well, just to catch anything that might be going on. But when you're doing these sort of checkups, you can't just think, oh, I'll just do every test underneath the sun, because it doesn't work like that. All right. So for example, when I was doing my own yearly checkup, they'll offer me all sorts of these excessive blood tests. And I feel like, because I have the background knowledge to know which ones to pick, so I don't sort of, spend all this extra money for unnecessary tests. I just want to share this all with you. So a lot of these extra tests that they can offer to you or charge you for are things like tumor markers. And they'll be like, oh, on the surface, it sounds like a really good idea. Oh, I'll just do all these tests and, hopefully it shows nothing. But on the off chance it does, then I'm good, right? Right. So that it's not really that's not really the best idea. So for example, one of the more common tumor markers is things like CA125. And I've seen cases where they have done this test on a man. Now, for these sort of tests, what you're really looking for are female reproductive system issues like ovarian cancer. Okay, it's not really any use on a man. But the thing about these sort of tumor markers is that the name is also very misleading. People think that it's a marker for a tumor, and often it is used as a marker for a tumor, but it can also increase in other situations as well. For example, CA125 can fluctuate during your menses. It can go up if you have endometriosis, or alpha fetoprotein. It's another sort of tumor marker people use. It can also go up in cases like liver cirrhosis or hepatitis. And then people will see these results and they get scared and they go like, oh my God, do I have a tumor? Is there something wrong? And it leads down that road of anxiety and all sorts of extra tests just to make sure that, oh, it's not actually something scary causing it to go up. All right. So for these sort of blood tests, you need to exercise a bit of discretion when it comes to them, especially when it comes for things like tumor markers. So tumor markers are not something that you use on people just willy-nilly. You should use it when people are, in a higher risk group, or you have a reason to suspect that they may have had something go wrong. It's not something that you do on someone who is young and perfectly healthy, who you have no reason to suspect that they may have a tumor. So it's something that you use when you already have that suspicion, or someone who already has cancer and you know it, and you can use it to help track it. So, if it goes higher, if it goes lower. So it's not something that you have to order if you are young and perfectly healthy, you're not in any sort of risk group, because then, it can just cause a lot of unnecessary anxiety. Now, people also think that these sort of tests are super accurate, but they're not. They have this idea of, oh, I'm just going to go to the doctor. The doctor is going to do all these tests and they're going to find everything that is wrong with me. But lab tests are not 100% accurate. So whenever we create a test to screen for a disease, to detect an anomaly, or to measure some sort of physiological parameter like blood pressure, we have to determine how valid that test is. Does it measure what it sets out to measure accurately? And there are a lot of factors that combine to describe how valid a test is, like sensitivity and specificity. Now, these are two such factors. We often think of sensitivity and specificity as being ways to indicate the accuracy of a test or a measure. Now, sensitivity is the ability of a test to correctly identify patients with a disease, and specificity is the ability of a test to correctly identify people who do not have a disease. So ideally, what we really want are tests with high percentages in both of these. But what we find when we go through all of these really common tests that people go for is that, some of these tests are better at one than the other. All right, so not all tests are perfectly accurate. So, the other factor is also that doctors cannot just, blindly mass order diagnostic tests. Now, diagnosis is hard to do because, after all, doctors are also human and we're not gods. So, to have a right diagnosis, your doctor has to be able to guess right because they're the ones to prescribe a test and they're the ones that have to choose the right ones to perform. A lot of people think that lab tests or investigations are what give the diagnosis. But how it really works is that the doctors should already have a good idea of what your diagnosis is just from talking to you, from getting your medical history and doing their initial, physical examination. The further tests are there to confirm their diagnosis, to confirm what they think you already have. So they should have an idea already and then order tests that will help confirm or rule out their potential diagnoses. So it's educated guesswork. There is no one single test that will show everything that you're looking for. There's more than 3,500 lab tests out there, and we can't test all of them. So you gotta pick some of them, and it's that picking process that can sometimes go wrong. There's about 1,400 known species of human pathogens, including viruses, bacteria, fungi, etc. More than 200 viruses are known to cause diseases in humans. So it's down to your doctor's expertise to pick the right test that will lead to the right diagnosis. And scans are also, they're not infallible either. They can't detect everything. Now, people have this impression of scans as something, especially if it comes to tumors or something scary like cancer. They think that, oh, if I have something there, then it's going to show up on a scan because it's this lump somewhere in my body. Why wouldn't they be able to see it on a scan? So the other thing is that people have this impression of tumors or cancers as a sort of quick disease, or some people are, they're only diagnosed late or only after symptoms have developed. So the treatment for cancer also takes a toll on the body. So the overall impression of someone diagnosed with cancer is that, oh, they're diagnosed with cancer and then they start getting sick really, really, really fast. And then all of a sudden, they're gone from this world. So they have this impression of cancer being this fast moving disease, but that's not necessarily the case. So what happens is that in most cases, when people have this quick downfall, it's because they're diagnosed with late stage cancer and then they become unwell on chemotherapy and radiation, which is normal, but it contributes to that image of cancer as a fast-acting disease. For example, pancreatic cancer is a super rare cancer, yet it's among the top 5 leading causes of cancer death in the United States. About 95% of people diagnosed with pancreatic cancer will die from it. Pancreatic cancer is so deadly because it tends to be diagnosed only in the late stages. Only about 10% of people manage to be diagnosed when the cancer is confined to the pancreas and is able to be removed by surgery. In the early stages of the cancer, when it is the most treatable and the most survivable, it doesn't really cause any symptoms. So people don't know to look for it. And by the time symptoms like jaundice, weight loss, abdominal pain, by the time people get these symptoms, the tumor has already grown to a significant size and has likely already metastasized. So it's that short time interval between diagnosis and death that further contributes to this image of cancer as a really fast killer. But in reality, cancer is a super, super slow and progressive disease. As with many other health conditions like heart disease, cancer is not a disease that happens overnight. The phase early stage cancer is slightly misleading as well, because it can give patients the impression that cancer is something that just happened to their body, or it's only just occurred, when it's likely been in their body for years and years. They just didn't know about it. So similar to bacteria, cancer cells will multiply over time. But while that doubling time can be minutes for bacteria, for cancer cells, it can take much, much longer. While people might notice an infection taking hold in a few hours or a few days, it can be years or even decades before a tumor grows large enough to be visible by medical imaging techniques or to cause symptoms that will prompt a trip to the doctor. The actual time it takes cancer to grow from a single cancer cell to a cancerous tumor is unknown, but researchers can make estimates based on doubling time, which is the amount of time it takes a tumor to double in size, so from 2 to 4 to 8, etc. If the doubling time stays constant as a tumor grows, then a cancer with a doubling time of 20 days would take 2 years to develop into a detectable tumor, while a doubling time of 200 days would take 20 years. So, but the thing with cancer cells is that they're rarely consistent. So they really have a consistent growth rate. You might have a tiny tumor there, and some of the cells there might be growing super rapidly. Some of the cells there might be growing super slow, and there's all sorts of other factors that also determine how fast a cancer grows. But on a general basis, let's just take some examples. Breast cancer can have an estimated doubling time of 50 to 200 days. This means that breast cancer diagnosed today could have been growing quietly in the body for the past 5 or 20 years. Lung cancer can have a doubling time of about 70 days to more than 200 days, depending on the type. Colon cancers can have a doubling time of about 92 to an impressive over 1,000 days. This means that if someone was diagnosed with cancer in their 40s or even older, the cancer could have been growing in their body since their 20s. So, for about 2/3 of the history of cancer, neither the patient nor the doctor is even aware that it's there. So even if imaging studies like X-rays, CT scans, MRI scans, or PET scans show no tumor, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is no cancer there. It could just be something that is not able to detect. Although our technology now does really seem like something out of a science fiction film, our modern imaging techniques, they still have their limitations. So our imaging techniques, they can find tumors, but only tumors of a certain size. Even with rapid advancements in imaging quality and the new high quality digital x-rays, the smallest lesions they can detect is still only about 1 to 2 centimeters for an x-ray. PET scans have a limit of about 4 millimeters, and the smallest lesion a CT scan can reliably measure is about 3 millimeters, with MRI scans having about the same. So a 1 centimeter tumor has about 100 million cells already, and that's a lot of cancer cells. All right, so still, even with scans, there is a limit to these things. Now, some people, even doctors, they have this over-reliance on scans, like CT scans or X-rays to find problems. However, out of the positive screening results, a CT scan has a 96.4% false positive rate, and a chest X-ray has a 94.5% false positive rate. All right, so a lot of things can look suspicious on a scan, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is something suspicious or it is something that is something concerning. So if you found something on a scan, the thing about these scans is that if a doctor finds something suspicious, they have an obligation to follow through and to check to make sure that it really isn't something scary. But in the vast majority of cases, that suspicious spot on the scan, it turns out to be nothing, like a benign lymph node, a spot of granuloma, etc. Now, some people will even get a CT scan every year because they think it's a good way to catch problems. CT scans have a lot of radiation. CT scans will bring a lot of false positive rates. All right, that means that, if you have a scan, it just means that a lot of the time you're just setting yourself up for more anxiety and further tests because the doctors might find something a little suspicious on the scan, and then you get that anxiety going like, oh my gosh, is there something there? And then you have to go through all of these tests. It's just a lot. It's just a lot of unnecessary anxiety, a lot of unnecessary tests. Not to mention that CT scans have a lot of radiation. One chest CT scan, just the chest, not your entire body, is equivalent to about 100 to 800 x-rays, depending on the x-ray you get. The more CT scans you get, the more radiation you're exposed to. The more radiation you get, the higher the chances of developing cancer. Overall, the odds are very low. So the thing about radiation is that people have this idea is like, I don't know, they have this impression where radiation just sort of resets over time or just sort of wears off. But no, radiation accumulates. All right, that radiation damage, it accumulates. You never sort of get rid of it. So it's over a lifetime, not over a year, and it just like magically resets or something like that. No, it's counted over a lifetime. So overall, your chances of getting cancer due to radiation are still very low, but the chance of getting a fatal cancer from any one CT scan is about 1 in 2,000. That's really, really low. So even though the radiation dose is low and the chances are still really low, it still doesn't mean that you should get CT scans when you really don't need them. CT scans are something that should be reserved for the times when you actually do need them, when you actually are looking for something and you have a specific idea of what you're looking for. Now, some diseases also cannot be detected during the incubation period. There are certain diseases like hepatitis that will lie in wait and only cause problems much later on. Some people with hepatitis have symptoms, some people will not have symptoms. And in the case of things like hepatitis B, there is what is called a window period. This means that although someone is infected, our modern tests don't detect it. So these markers in the blood that we're looking for, they're still negative. For other diseases, there is a gap between being infected and showing symptoms. For example, chickenpox has an incubation period of 1 to 3 weeks. This means that there is 1 to 3 weeks between the point where you are infected to the point where you realize you've been infected. Even worse, you can spread the disease to other people before you know you have it. Other diseases like HIV has an incubation period between 1 and 6 weeks. For COVID-19, an infected person can spread it 2 days before showing any symptoms or even testing positive. The symptoms in some cases can take as long as 14 days to appear. So there is a little bit of a gap there as well. So a lot of it comes down to the timing as well. Are you timing these tests right? So when it comes to all of these tests, you can't just go, oh, it's okay if I catch a test, because then all I have to do is go to the doctors, they'll find it, and then they'll treat me. All right, but that's not what we want, because one disease can induce other illnesses. So you don't want to get sick. You don't want to have that mentality of, oh, it's okay if I get sick because the doctors will fix me. That's not necessarily the case. For a lot of the time, illnesses can trigger other illnesses. And in some cases, recovery from an illness doesn't mean that you're out of the woods. It doesn't mean that you're 100% back to what you were before. Infections have the potential to trigger other seemingly unrelated diseases, like autoimmune diseases. Now, the idea that acute infections can trigger autoimmune diseases has been around for a while and has sort of simmered in the minds of doctors for years. Now, almost all autoimmune diseases have been associated with at least one infection. In addition, those who already have an autoimmune disease are more likely to come down with infections because of the treatment that they have. Now, multiple microorganisms can be associated with one type of autoimmune disease, meaning that there can be multiple infectious triggers, which just makes it even harder to pinpoint the exact trigger. So what happens here is that when the body is fighting an infection, the immune system leaps into action. It produces antibodies against the foreign invader. To do this, the immune cells will target markers or antigens on the foreign invader. The B cells, a type of immune cell, will produce antibodies that are meant to target these markers and tag them for destruction. but sometimes a mistake is made. And these antibodies can mistakenly target the body's own cells and tissues instead. And this will cause antibodies that will target the body's own cells. And what happens there is that your immune system starts destroying your own body. And this is what an autoimmune disease is. So some autoimmune diseases, allergies, or even cancer can be triggered by other infections, medications, or illnesses. For example, viral infections can trigger diseases like multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, myocarditis, myasthenia gravis, and Guillain-Barré syndrome. Now, it's not just infections. Drugs can induce other diseases as well. Medications aren't the cure-all that people think. They're not always going to be there to save us. So it's always a balance in medicine of, do the benefits of the medication outweigh the side effects? In some cases, they do. In some cases, they don't. Some antibiotics can cause alveolar hemorrhage, which is bleeding into the little air spaces inside of the lungs, or interstitial fibrosis, which is scarring of the lungs and or lung toxicity. NSAIDs, which are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which are commonly painkillers like ibuprofen, can cause gastrointestinal mucosal injury and GI bleeding. Some antibiotics and antidepressants can cause ventricular arrhythmia, leading to sudden cardiac death. So just because some of these side effects are rare doesn't mean that they shouldn't be taken into account. They still need to be seriously considered. Some medications can wake up dormant viruses. Now, 70 to 90% of people have human papillomavirus 2, or also known as the JC virus. Now, for most people, it doesn't cause any problems because it just lies dormant there, meaning it just doesn't do anything. The virus is inactive. So people with it, they don't get sick. They don't even know that they have it. However, when the immune system is weak due to disease, or if someone takes a drug that suppresses the immune system, the virus can wake up and cause a serious, potentially fatal illness known as progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. Now, this is a scary disease because, simply put, what happens then is that it attacks the brain and it causes severe and rapidly progressing damage to the brain's white matter. Now, the white matter is the part of the brain that helps in communication within the brain and the spinal cord. Now, about 30 to 50% of people with this will die in the first few months. And those who do survive usually survive with lasting neurological disabilities. Certain medications, such as the ones commonly used to treat autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis or Crohn's, can wake up the virus. All right, so there's a lot of things out there, and we can't just rely on doctors to go, oh, you know what? To number one, know what's wrong with you, and number two, to fix it for you. And there's also the case where you can't believe someone just because they're a doctor or they hold a PhD. Here, I just want to point out, a lot of the times we hear people saying, oh, this and this must be true. This and this and must be the case because a doctor said it. Or, this other famous person with impressive credentials said it. I just want to say, doctors are not gods. A lot of them aren't even particularly knowledgeable. You can't assume that doctor automatically means someone intelligent. You have to remember that a person who just barely made it into medical school, the one who just barely passed, if they graduated, that person is a doctor too. When it comes to science in general, it's more about the majority, not the minority. It's about where the evidence is. It's not about, oh, who says this and that just, that's just more important than everything else that has been said. Some common things we hear are things like, oh, someone has breast cancer and they can't have soy because their doctor said so. when in reality they can. It's not an issue. Or someone on blood thinning medication, they can't have vegetables because their doctor said so, when in reality they should be eating vegetables. Or the doctor says, you're on thyroid medication, you can't have soy or broccoli because of goitrogens, but that's also not the case. None of that is true. There are doctors who claim that cactus can cause excessive bleeding from the uterus. That's also not true. There's nearly 2,000 different species of cactus in the world. The edible ones, they're used as a vegetable and a fruit in so many countries around the world. If it was so dangerous, people wouldn't be eating it like they would eat lettuce or tomatoes. All right. So you would think that doctors who end up in the news would undergo some sort of screening process and be one of the good ones. But no, that's not the case either. Unfortunately, when it comes to these things, it's all about, who can generate the most views, who can capture the attention of the masses. And oftentimes, the ones who can do that are the ones at the fringes. So then you get cases like a licensed Ohio physician who would tell the U.S. House Health Committee during a hearing that COVID-19 shots magnetize people and create 5G interfaces. Now, there are people who claim that hydroxychloroquine is a cure for COVID-19. Doctors who prescribed ivermectin for COVID-19. All of this, despite a mountain of evidence showing that no, COVID-19 shots do not turn us into Magneto, even though that would be pretty cool. Hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin are useless as well. Now, so you gotta follow the evidence and the majority consensus, not just listen to a few fringe individuals. So there's a lot of people out there, even professors from famous university or people in high places. They don't always know what they're talking about. They're just given a louder voice because they have a larger platform. It doesn't mean that whatever they say is actually correct. So you have people like Scott Atlas, a professor at Stanford University Medical Center and advisor on the White House Coronavirus Task Force, saying that people who are deemed to be low risk should be encouraged to gain herd immunity. So there were a lot of people advocating for this, even though there was a lot of evidence showing that it wouldn't necessarily work or that it's not a good idea. All right, so reinfection with COVID-19 is possible, added to the fact that it can cause severe disease and complications, meaning that people getting infected for the sake of herd immunity will mean a lot of people dying, a lot of people ending up with severe complications, and the healthcare system getting overwhelmed. Plus, you have all these new variants popping up as well. For example, if you take real life data, in Brazil, it was estimated that more than 60% of the population was infected by COVID-19, which should have been enough to trigger herd immunity, but that wasn't the case. They did have a temporary dip in cases, but then there was a new variant and a spike quickly happened. So no, it's not a good idea. You also have people saying that children have virtually zero risk of dying and a very, very low risk of any serious illness from COVID-19. Now, children are just as likely to be infected with COVID-19 as adults are, but it is true that they are less likely to be severely ill, but less likely is not virtually zero. There is still a chance. And then when it comes to children, there's a lot of children who have been hospitalized in the ICU on a ventilator. Babies are actually at a higher risk of severe illness than older children. Children are also at risk of something called multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. So it's a serious condition which is triggered by all the inflammation in their body. It can damage their hearts, lungs, blood vessels, kidneys, digestive system, brain, skin, eyes, etc. It's potentially life-threatening, and it can be triggered by a COVID infection. They're also equally at risk of things like long COVID or getting these long-term effects as well. Them being children isn't going to save them from that. So by saying things like this, what you're really doing is that you're giving people this false sense of security. security. You're and in the worst case scenarios, it's sort of telling people, oh, because they're children, you don't need to protect them as much from COVID. Or because they're children, they don't need to take these preventative measures, which is wrong. You still need to protect them because they can still get sick. A small chance is not zero chance. Or you have people saying that masks do not prevent the spread of COVID, which is it's just false. We have all sorts of data showing now that it really does prevent the spread of COVID. So in science, once again, it's not just about who's famous, what position they have, what degree they have. It's about what the evidence shows and what the consensus is. It's about the proof out there. There's also a difference between approved medical treatments and experimental research. All right, so approved medical treatments are intended to benefit and help patients with accepted protocols. What this means is that they know the dose, the timings, the expected results. They know how to get the results that they want and avoid the bad ones. Experimental research is intended to uncover both the good and bad aspects of a particular procedure or medication. So what that means is that they don't know the dose, the timing, the expected results. They're still figuring that out. So an example of this is stem cell research. So people have this idea that stem cells are some sort of miracle cure. They can cure all of our medical problems and work magic, like regrowing lost limbs or regrowing organs. In reality, it's not quite so fabulous. You just have to remember every time you see an article in the news like, oh, scientist grows heart in a lab. Scientist regrows an eye in a frog using stem cells. You only ever see the success. You never see the hundreds, the thousands of failures before that success. So all of that, it contributes to this image of stem cells being able to cure anything. Right, so far, the only approved uses of stem cells in humans are for bone marrow transplants to treat blood cancers or other blood diseases. Now, people also have this idea that stem cell treatments are safe. They are not. They believe that you just have to inject it or you just have to put it in the right place. And like Play-Doh, you'll be able to mold it into exactly what you need. That is not the case. They are not without risk. Stem cells they have that potential to turn into anything. It has a potential to turn into any cell in your body. But people, they always think, oh, the good cells. They never think of the bad cells, like cancer. Stem cells can become cancers too. That's a possibility. Cancer is a cell. They can become cancerous cells. They also live longer than normal cells, which also increases the risk of genetic mutations, which increases the risk of scary diseases like cancer. There's a lot of safety concerns with stem cells as well. Now, so far, stem cells, they have a lot of potential, but the difficulty is trying to control what stem cells turn into. We still don't have that down yet. So in that case, if we're just blindly injecting it into people and hoping that it will turn into what we want, that's not good enough. That's not effective. That's not safe. When it comes to stem cells, we want to be able to have that control over them, to control what they turn into, to make sure that they stay where we want them to stay, to make sure that they turn into what we want them to turn into, instead of turning into something scary. Because there's already been cases in the past where stem cells injected into sites have turned into tumors, or they turned into something that people really didn't want it to turn into. So they have huge potential, but until we have more understanding of how they work and how to regulate them, no one should be injecting them into their body and just hoping that these cells will magically turn out into what we want them to turn into. Now, experimental designs, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Not all experiments are legit. Now, a lot of these, for an experiment to have a valid, good result, the experiment needs to have been planned and have been done properly. For example, there are claims that come from circumstantial evidence. This means indirect evidence that doesn't prove anything, but in a lot of people's minds, it creates a link, right? And it gives this impression of, oh, this will cause this. For example, like the belief that Paraban will cause breast cancer. That's just not true. All right, but it was due to this circumstantial evidence that made people, automatically jump to the, oh, A causes B. And that's not the case. According to the US FDA and the American Cancer Society, there is currently no reason to be concerned about the use of cosmetics or other products that contain parabens. So another one is COVID comes from Wuhan. This is all circumstantial evidence. What exactly touched off the pandemic, where ground zero is still a mystery because we still have nothing definitive. Now, some experimental designs is just terrible. A good example of this is sugar causes cancer. All right, so what they did there was that they have tumor cells. They give these tumor cells sugar, and then these tumor cells grow, right? So then they think, oh, because when I give these tumor cells sugar and they grow, that must mean that sugar causes cancer, right? Because it's causing it to grow faster, right? Right? It seems logical on the surface, but it's not really. So what you also need to do is that you need to have normal cells. All right, normal cells. So if you give normal cells sugar, it's going to grow too, because that's just what cells do. All cells need sugar. So this is a bad design that leads to a bad result. Okay, so you can't just rely on all of these. You just can't rely on everything that you read or see. You have to look into it a little bit, dig a little bit, do your own sort of thinking, do your own sort of critical analysis. Another one is that green tea can inactivate the COVID-19 virus. So how did they test this? How did they come up with this conclusion? What they did was that they looked at all sorts of people who drank green tea. So what about this guy? All he did was drink green tea and he got well. Or, it's the same thing with a lot of other things out there. Some people will take medicinal herbs, they feel better, and then they attribute it to the herbs. Or some people, they sleep very poorly. They stick a crystal underneath their pillow and then they sleep very well. And they say, oh, it's because of the healing properties of my special rock underneath the pillow. That's not the case, okay? You have to have a good design that will test for all of these variables to make sure that it is specifically this that is causing this result. So what happens here is that it's just circumstantial. People will drink green tea and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're curing themselves of COVID-19. What happens is that most people with COVID-19, they will get better on their own. All right, whether or not they drink green tea, they will get better on their own. All right, or it's the same with most diseases. A lot of diseases, people do tend to feel better after the body recovers on their own. All right, or even if you're just sleeping worse one night, eventually you're going to hit a night where you do sleep a little bit better, and it's not because of a rocky stuck underneath your pillow. That would have happened whether or not it was there. All right, so it's all of these things that will lead people down the wrong conclusion. So what we really want to do is that we just want to take good care of ourselves. We want to take good care of our immune system, and it will take good care of us. Remember that doctors are humans, we're not gods, and there are no medications with no side effects. All right, so if you get sick and you go to the doctor and they give you some medication, you have to take it with the awareness that yes, it may help you, but it may also bring some negative side effects that you don't really want. For example, while antibiotics are responsible for saving countless lives, it is not without side effects. Antibiotics kill bacteria indiscriminately, especially if they're broad spectrum antibiotics, which means that it will also kill populations of helpful bacteria, such as the bacteria living in your gut. Destroying these friendly bacteria in large numbers can have negative health consequences. Antibiotics can also have side effects ranging from simple ones like just a little bit of tummy upset, to more serious consequences like deafness or even potentially life-threatening toxic epidural necrolysis. Unfortunately, against bacterial infections, there is currently no better than antibiotics. But that doesn't mean that they're the best option out there. People always think, oh, the best option out there is the cure, where the best option out there is actually just prevention, just stopping yourself from getting sick to begin with. Now, prevention doesn't mean that you will never get sick, because that's unrealistic. All right, all the steps that we're taking here, it is to reduce our chances of getting sick. We all get sick, it's part of being human. But instead of being that person who gets sick multiple times a year, that person who comes down with the flu every single time, the person who always gets the cold if the cold is going around the office, we want to be that person who is strong enough to, not get infected with the cold, to escape that cold that's going around the office. Or if we do get the cold, then we want to recover quickly and relatively painlessly, rather than to be that person who is just down for days and days and days. We want to give our body the best, the greatest chance to be healthy and to stay healthy, so that there's less of a chance of an infection turning into something more serious or triggering long-term consequences like autoimmune diseases. And remember what I mentioned before about how, all sorts of diseases like cancer, it takes a long time to grow. It's the same thing with our health. Prevention is something that takes a long time to build up, takes a long time to set that foundation. So it is something that needs to be started from young. But the next best time is just right now. So prevention is better than a cure. The best way to help build up your body, to build up your immune system, to take care of yourself, is to eat a variety of plant foods. Eat lots of vegetables and fruits of different colors. Exercise and sleep well. These things, they always go together. Be happy and learn the correct knowledge of health, because when it comes to our health, you can't just blindly hand off your health, your well-being to someone else. Other people, they make mistakes. Other people, they have gaps in their knowledge as well. So you also have to build up your own knowledge, to have the correct knowledge so that you know the right things to do. Because ultimately, if you just hand it off to someone else and they make a mistake, what happens then? Well, nothing happens to them. You're the one who has to suffer for it. So when it comes to our health, ultimately, our own health is our own responsibility. And it is up to us to gain the knowledge so that we know what to do to protect our own health. And then once we are able to protect our own health, we can help all the people around us to protect their own health as well. The best doctor in the world is our very own immune system. So we really do need to do everything that we can to help take care of it.
Now we will be answering some questions from the audience. Please state your question in the live chat section. Kindly avoid asking questions about personal illnesses and ask each question only once. Dr. Yi, what is the latest development in the preventing and curing of dementia?
All right. So when it comes to dementia, it is also one of those things that is more down to prevention than for curing. Because when it comes to dementia, a lot of the times I'm really sorry to say, but there is no cure for dementia. There are ways to help slow down the progression. There are ways to make it easier to live with, easier to manage. But so far, there is no way to cure dementia. So when it comes to dementia, dementia is a broad range of diseases. It's not just one disease out there. There's a lot of different diseases that can cause dementia. Right? One of the most common causes of dementia is just old age. As we get older, our body breaks down. And one of the things that break down is also our brain. So one of the best ways to prevent dementia is to use our brain. Everyone knows is that if you don't work out, If you don't use your muscles, you lose it. It's the same thing with our brain. If you don't use your brain, you lose it. There was an infamous experiment done with nuns. Now, they did it with nuns because, well, nuns, they live in a very controlled environment. They live in the same place, they're exposed to the same things, they have generally the same diet. So, all those factors are controlled for, which is good experimental design. You want to control for everything that you can control. And what they noticed was that, the nuns who had more brain intensive vocations like teaching, they suffered from less of this mental decline as they got older, whereas the nuns who had less brain intensive jobs, they had more of a mental decline when they got older. So a lot of it comes down to just using your brain. Now, there was another study done on musicians and Alzheimer's disease. It's not quite the same, but it is very similar. And what they found was that these musicians, even though they were a very advanced age, when they got to the autopsy table after their death, and when the doctors or scientists looked into their brains, they found that their brains had signs of Alzheimer's disease. But when they were alive and when they were performing, they had no symptoms. They had no signs that they ever had this disease, even though the autopsy said that they did. So why is that? Scientists believe that it's because they use their brains. Playing instruments, being a musician, it's very brain intensive. And because they were using their brains all the time, the brains were never allowed to just, get lazy, to relax and just, atrophy like your muscles would, just disappear like your muscles would. The brains were never allowed to do that because they were always using it, always using it. So their brains just kept up with them. Because, with our body, you just have to remember our body is inherently lazy. All right. It always takes a path of least resistance. So if you're the type who just, lays around, does nothing, you're going to lose muscle mass. Like guys who go to the muscle and guys who go to the gym and they work out all the time, they build that muscle. You know what I'm talking about. If you stop going to the gym, you lose muscle mass because that's just what your body does. Your body goes, oh, you're not using this anymore? Okay, I'm not going to keep it up. I don't need to. You're not using it. I'm just going to take the lazy path. I'm going to reabsorb it, use it for the other things. You're not using it. Why would I keep it up? Same concept when it comes to your brain. All right. So if you want to avoid the sort of mental decline as you get older, you got to use your brain. All right. You got to do things like just don't sit in front of the TV and just watch TV all day. Don't just mindlessly scroll on your phone. Okay, that's not using your brain. Do things like, learn a new instrument, learn a new language, do something with your brain, teach other people your knowledge, write, just exercise your brain, keep exercising your brain. And that is one of the best ways to prevent this age-related mental decline as you get older. All right, so keep learning more about health as well. That's one of the ways you can keep using your brain. All right, another thing that causes dementia is other diseases. So other diseases like Parkinson's disease can cause its own sort of Parkinsonian dementia. So a lot of it will also come down to prevention, to help keep your body as healthy as possible so you don't come down with diseases that will ultimately harm your brain. Right? So a lot of it is down to, again, just prevention and preventing yourself from losing your mind to begin with, or to prevent yourself from getting diseases that can hasten this decline in your mental acuity. But if you already have signs of dementia, it doesn't mean that it's too late. There are still ways to help you manage the dementia. It's never too late to start using your brain, just the same as it's never too late to start exercise either, or to start, building muscle mass. It's never too late to start doing these things. And it's the same way here. It's never too late to start using your brain. So even if you're already older, even if you're already, experiencing signs of this decline, it's not too late to put in the work, to use your brain a little bit more, because what that does is that it can help your brain compensate. Because the more you use your brain, people think that your brain is very static, that it doesn't change over time, but it does. If you have areas of damage in your brain, like those musicians with the Alzheimer's disease, what your brain does is that it learns to compensate. It will rewire itself so that the rest of your brain helps compensate for the damaged areas. And it is the same here. If you keep using your brain can learn to compensate, and you will have a better quality of life. You will have a slower progression of this mental decline. Right? And it's also just taking care of your health as well, and making sure that your body in general is very well equipped to help support the health of your brain as well.
Dr. EE, how can we prevent fibroid growth in the uterus? What nutrition helps? Also, what causes fibroid growth and heavy and prolonged menstruation? Will fibroids become cancerous, and why do they grow back after surgical removal?
So when it comes to fibroids, doctors aren't 100% sure what causes it. Now, the thing about fibroids is that a lot of women will have fibroids in their uterus and they're just not aware of it because it's not in a position that causes any symptoms, or it's not large enough to cause it. Since doctors don't really know what causes it, they also don't really know what can be done to prevent it. What we're seeing now is that just some people have it, some people don't. Most of the time, it doesn't cause a problem. Right? So with fibroids, it only becomes a problem if it's in a precarious position, or if it's grown to the point where it starts pressing on other organs, or it starts, or it has other issues like you start bleeding within the fibroid or things like that. So for most cases, fibroids are just something that happens in your body. It is not something that you have to be particularly concerned about unless you start having a lot of symptoms. Now, in most cases, fibroids, they don't need to be removed, all right? But they can be removed if they've grown very large, or if they're causing issues like they're taking up the uterine cavity. So you don't have enough space. For example, if you want to get pregnant and it's taking up all of the space, you might opt to have it removed. But in most cases, it doesn't really cause any issues. Now, fibroids are also one of these things that can fluctuate in size, and it fluctuates in size with your hormones. All right, so they can get bigger, they can get smaller. And for a lot of people, after they reach menopause, their fibroids will shrink in size because the hormones will change. And when it comes to regrowth after surgery, it's just one of those things that fibroids do. Doctors, again, they aren't sure what exactly causes it. So when it comes to heavy or prolonged menstruation, yes, fibroids can cause this, but a lot of other things can cause heavy and prolonged menstruation as well, such as endometriosis, which is it's an entirely different disease from fibroids. What happens there is that the lining of your uterus there is abnormal with endometriosis. So it gets super thick, it sort of overgrows. This lining can travel to other areas in your body as well and cause all sorts of issues there. And one of the most common symptoms of this is heavy and prolonged menstruation. So if you do have heavy and prolonged menstruation, what you do want to do is that you want to go to the doctors and check it out. Make sure that it's not a disease that is causing this. And if it is a disease, then it is something that can be managed. All right, so when it comes to fibroid growth, you don't have to worry about it. The vast majority of the time, fibroids are something benign. They do not become cancerous. So it is not something that will put you at, it's not something you have to worry about. Something that you think, oh, because I have fibroids, I'm going to get cancer. That's not the case. All right, fibroids are fibroids, cancer are cancers. And they don't really cross over into each other. All right, so to recap, fibroids are unfortunately something that we don't really know what causes it, but on the bright side, it is something that in most cases doesn't cause problems. So when it comes to our nutrition, when it comes to fibroids, a lot of it is just supporting our health in general. If you have very, very heavy menstruation, then you might want to take in a little bit more nutrition to help support your body, because it is a stressful time to be very heavily menstruating. So you want to take in enough nutrients to make sure that your body is supporting itself and you're not losing too many nutrients through that. Otherwise, it's just taking care of your health in general.
Dr. EE, could you please give us some diet and lifestyle advice for stage 3 kidney disease? Is it possible to reverse kidney disease at stage 3 and to heal the kidneys naturally?
All right, so when it comes to stage 3 kidney disease, that's already pretty advanced kidney disease. Unfortunately, when it comes to chronic kidney diseases, most of the time there is no way to cure the kidney disease or to reverse the damage that has already been done. In most cases, a lot of what we do is about slowing the progression of the kidney disease or stopping it from getting worse. And a lot of the times that will depend on the cause of the kidney disease. What is the cause of the chronic kidney disease? There are a lot of things that will cause damage to the kidneys. The kidneys are these finicky organs. They get upset over everything. So your kidneys, they're super fragile. A lot of things will cause kidney damage. For example, chronic kidney disease. A lot of people think that it's something like really serious or a specific disease that causes this, but in a lot of cases, it's high blood pressure will cause chronic kidney disease. A lot of people with chronic kidney disease, even severe kidney disease, is because they had high blood pressure and they didn't do anything about it. All right. Another major cause of chronic kidney disease is diabetes. If you have diabetes and you do not control it, you will very likely come down with kidney disease. Not say very likely, I would say nearly 100%. If you have diabetes and you don't control it, you will come down with kidney disease. Okay. It will happen. So diabetes is something that is also something that will cause a lot of kidney diseases. Another thing is toxins. There's a lot of toxins out there that will damage the kidneys. There's a lot of autoimmune conditions out there that will damage the kidneys. There are a lot of just congenital things that will damage the kidneys. If you have stones, it will damage the kidneys. If you have other sort of diseases in other organs, it will damage the kidneys. If you have heart disease, it can damage the kidneys. If you got liver issues, it can damage the kidneys. Everything will damage the kidneys. So when it comes to kidney disease, most of the management out there is just finding the cause, what is causing the damage, and to stop it. All right, so if it's high blood pressure, manage your high blood pressure, bring it down. If it's diabetes, manage your diabetes. Please eat better. Control your blood sugar levels. If it's something like autoimmune diseases, then you have to take those medications and make sure that your own body isn't trying to destroy your kidney. If it's heart disease, manage your heart disease. If it's a liver issue, manage the liver issue. All right. So when it comes to the kidneys, a lot of it is identifying the root cause and treating the root cause, because your kidney is just the unfortunate, it's just it's an unfortunate organ caught in the crossfire. Okay, so when it comes to the diet as well for the kidneys, a lot of the times for people with chronic kidney diseases, they do have to closely control their diet. So they have to do things like eat less protein. They have to manage their electrolytes super well. So they can't have things like too much sodium, too much potassium. They might have to manage their water intake as well. Now, all of these things doesn't necessarily mean that these things are inherently harmful to the body or inherently harmful to the kidneys. A lot of people will think that, oh, this person with kidney disease, they can't have protein. That must mean that protein is bad for you. That's not the case. It is because their kidneys are not working properly, therefore they cannot have these certain things. Not these certain things are causing the kidney issues. All right, it's the other way around. It's because their kidneys are not working properly, so they cannot have these things, because if they take too much, then their kidneys aren't able to manage the balance in your body as well as it should. All right, so your kidneys are one of those organs that are crucial for maintaining homeostasis or balance within the body. And if your kidneys are not working as they should, then you have to take more care into managing the balance. So like things like protein, protein is something that the kidneys should be able to filter, to see, one of those large molecules that the kidneys should be able to filter. But if your kidneys aren't working properly, you're not going to be able to filter your protein properly, which means that you have to look at other methods of controlling it. Okay, so people with kidneys, if they take too much protein in, it causes too much stress to the kidneys. It's a large molecule, the kidneys aren't able to handle it, but that doesn't mean that it's bad for the kidneys. People with normal kidneys, it's not an issue. All right, I don't want people to go away thinking, oh, protein is going to harm your kidneys. Not the case. People who have normal kidneys don't have this issue. People who have damaged kidneys do have an issue because their kidneys are not normal, they are damaged. All right, it's an entirely different scenario. It's the same thing with a lot of electrolytes like the potassium or the sodium. It doesn't mean that foods that have these nutrients are bad for someone who doesn't have kidney disease. It just means that because someone with kidney disease can't control this balance anymore, they have to be more careful about the salts that they're putting into their body because their kidney won't be able to manage the balance of these salts in their body as well as it should anymore. So when it comes to these kidney issues, a lot of the times it's down to these nutrients, but of course that would also depend on what exactly is the type of kidney damage you have, because it's also broken down into what part of your kidney is damaged, and the different parts will have different effects. Right, so it depends on what part of your kidney is damaged, what medications they're already on, are they on dialysis, and what is their schedule for the dialysis? Do they have other issues going on, other health issues going on? There's all sorts of balances like this. So, but in general, for people with kidney disease, they do have to be more careful about these things. But when it comes to kidney disease and protein, what the general recommendation is that they cut down on protein intake. But new research is showing that for other sources of protein, like plant proteins or soy proteins, these sort of proteins, they don't actually have a negative effect on their kidneys. So for people with kidney disease, they can consider adding more plant protein sources because your body, it does still need protein. So the healthier sources of protein for patients with kidney disease is more cutting out the animal sources of protein and replacing it more with plant sources of protein like soy protein. Soy protein is also a really great protein for everyone to eat, whether or not you have kidney disease. For example, studies of patients with diabetes and diabetic kidney disease, when they switched to plant proteins like soy, researchers found that this protein, it didn't really have that negative effect on the kidneys as animal protein would. So it is one of the things that you can consider eating instead. Soy protein is also really great because it's a complete protein, meaning that you're able to get all of the amino acids that you need from your diet. All right, so when it comes to all of these diseases, unfortunately, it's one of those things where you really have to focus more on prevention rather than waiting until you have the disease and then scrambling trying to fix it after the fact. That's why my entire presentation today was just about preventing diseases. You really want to prevent it because you don't want to get into the case where, oh, you have all this damage happening, because it's so difficult to reverse damage once it's already occurred. It's much easier to prevent it before it ever becomes a problem, right? But if you already have this sort of damage, prevention still plays a role. You can still work on preventing further damage, preventing it from getting worse. And a lot of that comes down to, especially if it comes to kidneys, it comes down to managing whatever it is that is damaging the kidney to begin with. What is it that is causing the kidney to be damaged? Is it an unhealthy lifestyle? If it is, then fix the unhealthy lifestyle. Otherwise, the kidneys will continue to be damaged. Is it another disease? Fix the other disease. Otherwise, the kidneys will continue to be damaged. So in the meantime, you still want to eat a healthy diet, but keep in mind that people with kidney disease do have certain restrictions on their diet.
Dr. EE, do medications such as blood thinners help with heart disease? If not, how can we improve our health if we are suffering from heart disease?
Okay. So when it comes to blood thinners and heart disease, what happens with people who have heart disease is that it's it's a multi-step progress to get heart disease. And by heart disease, I'm assuming you mean things like coronary heart disease, where the vessels get blocked. All right, I'm going to be talking about that. When it comes to your vessels getting blocked or things like that, what happens then is that it's a very long and slow progress. All right, so with this is that first it starts with the lining of your blood vessels being damaged. And what happens then is that that will increase the chances of that area of the vessel, attracting all of these sort of things that will cause a clot to form. All right, so normally your blood vessels are nice and smooth, because you have factors in your blood. You have certain things in your blood that is designed for your blood to clot. That's normal. That is to save your life. For example, if you have a wound somewhere, you don't want to just keep bleeding and bleeding and bleeding out, right? So your blood has things in it which is designed to form a clot under certain circumstances, like damage to the blood vessels, exposure to other things will cause your blood to clot. And normally inside your blood vessels, there's nothing inside your blood vessels that would trigger your blood to clot because that's abnormal. Your blood shouldn't be clotting inside of your body. Okay, that's abnormal. But what happens for people with these heart diseases is that they have damage to the lining of the blood vessels. Oftentimes, this damage can occur due to inflammation. Right, so you have damage in this lining of the blood vessel, and what this does is that it prompts your blood to clot because your blood is just like something's not right here. It's like okay, something's not right here, and if something's not right, it is just going to clot and block off the problem. And that's an issue because you don't want your blood to be clotting inside your body. All right, that should not be the case. So, in the very, very early stages, what happens then is that you get, you have all of the things going on. You get streaks of fatty deposits building up in your arteries. That can actually start happening from a really young age. You get streaks of fatty deposits happening in your blood vessels. And that's just the earliest form of heart disease. At that point, most people, they don't even suspect that they have heart disease yet. And, because sometimes all these fatty deposits, it can happen starting from really, really young. The researchers have found these fatty streaks in children. They have found these fatty streaks in, young male, otherwise healthy people, young fit men in their 20s, they've still found these fatty streaks. So it's the earliest stage of heart disease. And what happens then if you don't take care of it is that it just keeps building up, and your body will do what your body does, and it'll just be like, that's not quite right. So it tries to seal it off because it's something that will prompt your blood to clot, and you don't want that. You don't want that happening inside your body. So what happens with there is that you get this buildup along the inside of your arterial walls. You start getting this buildup, okay? And what happens then is that occasionally it can get so bad that it just blocks off the vessel completely, all right? But in most cases, what happens is that you get more inflammation, something happens, and then this little bit that your body has tried sealing off, it gets exposed to the blood. And when it gets exposed to the blood, what happens then is that your blood goes, oh, what is this? And it clots. And it is that sudden clotting which causes a blockage, which causes things like a heart attack or even a stroke because it blocks the vessel off and you're not getting any oxygen through there, right? So that is what happens in a heart attack. And what happens with your blood thinners is that blood thinners help stop your blood from clotting. So it is preventing this sudden clot from forming to begin with. All right, so if your blood is less likely to clot, then you're less likely to clot and block off your arteries. All right. So that's why blood thinners are used with heart diseases. So it also depends on the type of heart disease you got. Heart diseases, a lot of heart diseases will need blood thinners. If you have, that coronary artery disease, you got that atherosclerotic heart disease, you'll very likely be on some form of blood thinner because you don't want your blood to clot and form a blockage. If you have other types of heart diseases like an arrhythmia or a valve disease, meaning the little valves in your heart are a little bit weird or your heart's not pumping regularly, you can also be on blood thinners because when you have abnormal turbulent blood flow, also increases the risk of your blood clotting. So it can reduce the risk of these clots forming and shooting off elsewhere in your body. All right, so blood thinning medications is actually one of the really, really important, cornerstones of heart disease management. You want to make sure that the blood is thin enough that it's less likely to clot, but not so thin that you would bleed and bleed and bleed and bleed. All right, so it's a little delicate balancing act there. And so if you do have a heart disease, you will probably be on some form of blood thinner, and that is okay. It's okay to be on that because it does, for people who have heart disease, the balance there is that there's more benefit than there is harm. But that also depends on the balance you get. Have you thinned your blood to the right amount? All right, so, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing other things to improve your heart health either. So what this blood thinning medication does is that while it does reduce the risk of a clot forming, it doesn't get rid of that, that fatty, plaquey buildup on the inside of your blood vessels. That's still down to you. Okay, so a lot of people think that this fatty buildup, this plaquey buildup, it's stuck there forever. In some cases, it can be, especially if it's been there for years and years and it's calcified already. It's really, really hard. That is mostly stuck there. But if you're still in the earlier stages, if you're still in the earlier stages and it's not well established, you still have hope of reducing it or reducing the chances of it forming elsewhere in other arteries in your body. And the way to do that is to eat healthier and to exercise more. So a lot of people think that, when it comes to the diet, it's just about cutting down on cholesterol. And yes, while cutting down on cholesterol is important, it's also about other things as well. You want to eat more antioxidants because antioxidants will help fight a lot of the disease processes that will, damage the lining of your blood vessel. You want to eat more plant foods as well because plant foods will help keep your heart healthy. You want to exercise because exercise will increase the levels of good cholesterol in your blood. And what happens with the good cholesterol in your blood is that your good cholesterol will go around and it actually scavenges the bad cholesterol. So exercise is one of those ways that it's a double whammy. It lowers the levels of bad cholesterol in your blood and it increases the levels of good cholesterol in your blood, which in turn will help you lower the levels of bad cholesterol in your blood. So it's a double whammy. So you got to exercise more and you got to rest more as well. They always go together. People always focus on diet, exercise, and then they forget about the rest. If you're going super hard all day, you can eat healthy, you can exercise, but if you don't get enough rest, you're still putting yourself at risk of heart disease. For example, people who, when researchers looked at, night shift workers who don't have the best sleep schedule, who are, who have messed up circadian rhythms, they're not resting as well as they should, they're at increased risk of all sorts of diseases, including heart disease. So that in and of itself, not getting proper rest, not getting proper sleep, that in and of itself is a risk factor of heart disease. So it's all sorts of things that you do have to look at.
Dr. E, does the COVID booster vaccine affect someone who has recently had an angioplasty? What is the relationship between the immune system and long COVID?
So if you have the booster vaccine, even if you've had an angioplasty recently, you can still get the vaccine. I'm not talking about like the day after you get the procedure done. Give yourself a little bit of time to recover, but you can still get the booster vaccine afterwards. In fact, it's recommended that people with chronic health conditions like heart disease or other, even autoimmune diseases, cancer, people who are just generally a bit weaker, it's recommended that they get the booster vaccine so that they can have the highest level of immunity that they can to help prevent them from getting COVID. Because people who have these health conditions, people who are generally just not as healthy as they should be, they're actually at higher risk of severe COVID. They're at higher risk of getting, more severe complications from COVID. So it is important that they go for these booster shots so that they can boost their immunity as much as they can without actually getting COVID. So when it comes to long COVID is one of those things where we're still looking into. We still don't know what exactly is long COVID. So when it comes to long COVID, people will, it's just what people do, it's human nature. You get COVID, you recover from COVID, and then afterwards you get a headache and you wonder to yourself, oh, is my headache because of long COVID? Or you have a persistent cough and you go, is my cough because of long COVID? Or you get something else and you go, is my high blood pressure because of long COVID? Every health problem afterwards, you always think to yourself, is it because of COVID? So when it comes to this, a long COVID, it just makes it really, really difficult to pinpoint down what exactly is long COVID and what are all these other symptoms. Is it just coincidence? Is it actually COVID causing these symptoms, or is it just these things just happens after COVID? So a lot of what researchers and scientists are doing now is just pinpointing what exactly is long COVID, what exactly is it, how do we identify it? And once they've pinpointed that down, okay, what exactly is long COVID, then they can go into a little bit more digging, going into, okay, what exactly has triggered it? Why do some people get it? Why won't some other people get it? What exactly is it? So one of the more common things that we are seeing when it comes to long COVID are things like general fatigue, brain fog, persistent cough, things like this, which have been linked to long COVID. But what we really don't know is what exactly is causing it, why some people get it, why some people don't. But what we do know is that generally the trend we're seeing now is that people who have gotten COVID and don't have the vaccines are more likely to get long COVID, or people who are generally unwell, people who have chronic health conditions, who aren't very healthy, who have a weak immune system. They're also more likely to get long COVID. All right, so again, it's about prevention. You want to get the vaccines to prevent yourself from getting COVID and also to lower your risk of a long COVID. You want to take care of your body, to take care of your immune system so that you're able to recover faster if you do get COVID. So you're able to lower your chances of getting long COVID as well, because people who come down with severe COVID also have a higher risk of getting long COVID. Right? So even if you've already had COVID, you still have to work on building up your immune system, building up your health so that your body can recover faster, can recover more fully than someone who has not been taking care of their health and not been taking care of their immune system. So while the exact link between COVID, long COVID, our immune system is not super clear yet, what we do know, looking at the data that we have now, looking at all of the millions of cases of people who have already had COVID, what we do know is that if you are healthy, if you have gotten your vaccinations, if you have a strong immune system, you are at lower risk of getting long COVID.
Due to time constraints, the next question will be our last question. Dr. EE, why is my LDL level still high when I eat healthily? Also, I was told that only about 20% of the cholesterol in our bloodstream comes from the food we eat and that our body makes the rest. Does that mean that avoiding high cholesterol foods will not help much in controlling body cholesterol levels?
So that is actually true. Most of the cholesterol in your body is actually made by your body. It's not coming from your diet. So estimates show that, only about 20% of your cholesterol will come from your diet, and the other comes from your own organs, like your liver. Your body actually makes cholesterol because people always think of cholesterol as something bad, but you do actually need it. Your body needs cholesterol. You need cholesterol for making your cell membranes. You need it for synthesizing a lot of the hormones. So you do actually need cholesterol, and that's why your body makes so much of it. But that also it's also led to this idea of, oh, if only 20% of my cholesterol is coming from my diet, then what's the point of cutting down on cholesterol? So if you read these sort of news, it's again, it's the media. People like these headlines because it's very feel good. It feels good to know that you're suddenly free of the guilt when you eat unhealthy foods like bacon or eggs, but that's not necessarily the case. We still need to watch what we're eating, and we still have to aim for a healthy diet. For example, that 20% is not a small number. For example, if I told you you have a 20% chance of getting hit by a tree branch, then you'll be like, I'm not okay with those odds, right? So why are you okay with the odds here, right? Even if that 20% is coming from your diet, it's still something that you have to think of. It's not something that you can ignore. It's very, very tough to lower your cholesterol levels because there's a lot of things that we need to do, and it's a lot of things that can be tough to do. But one of the things that you do have full control over, that you can do for yourself, is your diet. So why are you giving up on things that you can't control and just going like, oh, I'm just going to give up on the thing that I can control because it doesn't matter? It does matter. All right. These sort of things do matter. These sort of little efforts, they do matter because your health is in your hands, and you have to take every opportunity you can to control all of the things that we can. A lot of the things when it comes to our health is out of our control. For example, the environment we live in. We can't we can't just magic away all the pollution in the air. We can't always avoid radiation because there's UV radiation out there. You can't stop breathing because there's pollutants in the air. There's a lot of things we cannot control when it comes to our health. So the things that we do control, like our diet, it becomes even more important. Right? So you do need to eat healthy. And a lot of the times your people who think they're eating healthy are actually eating as healthy as they think. All right. So which can actually make it really difficult for people to have a healthy diet because they have this misconception of what is healthy and what is not. Or they think that, oh, I'm eating a lot of these foods and it doesn't have a lot of cholesterol because they're just not aware that it has a lot of cholesterol. For example, people who have salted duck eggs, they think, oh, it's really yummy. I'm only eating a little bit, but it has a lot of cholesterol in it. So, for example, a duck egg has about 620 milligrams of cholesterol. One chicken egg, for comparison, has about 260 milligrams of cholesterol. Okay, the amount also matters. So if you have one egg, that's fine. One egg is fine. It's still about lower than 300 milligrams of cholesterol, which is good. But do you ever see people have one egg? No, right? They go out, they get like a breakfast fry up. What do they have? 3 fried eggs there. So it means that you're eating a lot of cholesterol. All right. Not all meat is the same as well. If you're eating, more normal meat out there, like chicken meat, then generally about 100 grams of meat contains about 70 grams of cholesterol, which is manageable. But if you're eating organs like liver or viscera, then the cholesterol content is so much higher. All right, so it's all about making these little choices in your diet. Just because it's 20% doesn't mean that it's a 20% that you can just throw away, because it is the 20% you can control. So that is the super important 20%. All right. So the other things that you can look out for is that your liver is the organ in your body that is producing most of the cholesterol, but it's also helping to detoxify your body. So you want to make sure that your liver is in tip-top shape. And the best way to do that is also through careful consideration of your diet. Next up is exercise, because diet alone isn't enough. There's a lot of things out there that can increase or lower your cholesterol levels. But when it comes to your cholesterol levels, like I mentioned before, it's split into two things. You have your bad cholesterol and you have your good cholesterol. Your bad cholesterol is commonly things like LDL cholesterol, and your good cholesterol is HDL cholesterol. Now, HDL cholesterol is good cholesterol because it actually protects you against a lot of health conditions. And what it also does is that it helps scavenge the bad cholesterol. So exercise is one of those few things that will increase the good cholesterol in your body. Now, while scientists and doctors out there, we have a lot of drugs that can help lower the bad cholesterol in your body, we don't have a lot of drugs that will increase the good cholesterol in your body. So you want to lower the bad and increase the good. And that is what you are looking for. All right, so when it comes to LDL cholesterol, you got to eat healthily, but you also have to take care of your body. Make sure that your liver is okay, and make sure that your idea of eating healthily is actually eating healthily. And that's where a lot of this education comes in.
Thank you, Dr. EE, for taking your time to educate us regarding health today.
Thank you so much, everyone, for taking your time to tune in to my talk, especially on a Saturday morning, especially when it's a holiday. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a fantastic holiday out there.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. This video will be accessible until September 14th, 9 a.m. Take care and stay safe. Goodbye.